healthy fish runs and everyone's ability to use and enjoy a healthy Columbia River. We regularly also work on fish passage issues on Oregon tributaries of the Columbia. I want to start by saying thank you to ODFW staff, to the Fish Passage Task Force and the Commission for the months, I guess it's actually years of good work to revise Oregon's fish passage rules. While, there wasn't universal agreement about those rules, I think by and large, they landed in a really good and helpful place. And I say that, first of all, to thank ODFW for what it did, but also so that what I'm about to say doesn't suggest that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that said, the Columbia Riverkeeper wants to express some pretty significant concern about last-minute changes to the basic definition of fish passage in the Oregon Fish Passage rules. The letter from Nez Perce and Umatilla tribes that the Chair Wall referenced earlier spells out those concerns in a lot of detail, and Columbia Riverkeeper fully supports the tribe's position. I want to spend just a little bit of time on the significance of some of those rule changes. Under the old rule, fish passage was defined explicitly and only as to mean volitional fish passage. And after the last minute rule changes, the definition of fish passage now includes trap and haul on par with volitional fish passage. And I just want to say that regardless of how that rule may have been interpreted or how ODFW staff thought about that's not a minor change. When you have a rule about fish passage, the definition of what fish passage means is core to the way that rule is going to get implemented. So it's not a minor change. It has real significance. And I think most people here understand that trap and haul, generally speaking, is not as good as volitional fish passage. In practice, it just doesn't seem to work as well. And I'm not trying to suggest that trap and haul is never an appropriate response to a fish passage issue. I think in certain situations, it could be part of a waiver or part of a mitigation, but changing the rule to put trap and haul on par with volitional fish passage as kind of the gold standard for fish passage in Oregon, we think it's unlikely that that's going to improve passage conditions for Oregon's migratory fish. And at the very least, it should have gone through the kind of robust public process and tribal consultation that other aspects of this rule revision benefited from. So respectfully, we see this as a significant problem, and we look forward to ODFW and the Commission working to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. We'll go to Jeff Dose. And Jeff, you'll have 3 minutes. Huh? I showed him online. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Jeff. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, Commission members, Director Melcher. Good morning. My name is Jeff Dose. I live in Roseburg. I'm a retired fish biologist who worked for over 30 years in the Umpqua River Basin. I am a past president of the Steamboaters, an organization that has been concerned about and protecting the North Umpqua River for over 50 years. The Steamboaters are a central and active member of the North Umpqua Coalition, for whom I am speaking today. The North Umpqua Coalition is compelled to speak to these issues because of the tribal interest who spoke earlier. Certainly there was additional information. I am compelled to provide some insight for your consideration in response to the late summer steelhead the late summer ODFW press release that was published in the Roseburg News Review regarding the 2022 return of wild summer steelhead to the North Umpqua. I was more than a little surprised that the headline said that the wild steelhead returns are improving. Certainly they are when taken in the very narrow context of comparison with the 2021 run, which was by far the lowest return in the history of the 76-year period of record. Additionally, not mentioned is that 6 of the lowest 10 returns ever reported occurred in the last 10 years. And these included the 2015, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 runs. To me, this is very alarming and a trend that must be taken very seriously. Rather than a celebration, the circumstance of this press release is little more than an admission that the wild summer steelhead population in the North Umpqua has declined substantially over the last 10 plus years, is frequently at or nearing the critical threshold for viability, is not recovering to anywhere near the desired abundance, and is frequently overwhelmed by the adverse impacts of hatchery releases. In last year's return, the hatchery abundance was twice the wild return, and this is not uncommon. The Coastal Multi-Species Management Plan identified that the PHOS for summer steelhead in the North Umpqua should not exceed 10%. The native fish conservation policy is clear that the management of native wild fish is of high priority. Neither one of these directions are currently being met, and unfortunately, do not appear to be of much importance to ODFW fishery staff. In April of 22, you directed the department to cease the North Umpqua summer steelhead hatchery program for sound, science-based reasons. Sadly and unwisely, after a court challenge to the commission's decision, ODFW was forced to release about 70,000 juvenile hatchery steelhead last year. They continue to take adult steelhead broodstock in anticipation of continuing the program. The North Umpqua Coalition applauds the Commission's decision last April. We will continue to do everything in our power to defend the Commission's action. We will also continue to push department leadership to make sound scientific and conservation-oriented management decisions that not only protect wild summer steelhead in North Umpqua, but will lead to rebuilding this iconic wild population. I thank you for your time and this opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. There aren't questions now, so we'll go on, Jeff. Thank you. And Eric Brickenstein. Go ahead, Eric, and you'll also have 3 minutes and you get extra points if you stay within that 3 minutes.
I will make sure to do that. And thank you, Commissioner Wall, commissioners and director. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Eric Brickenstein. I'm an attorney at the law firm Hagelin Kelly in Portland, and I represent a newly formed organization, Oregon Crabbers for a Sustainable, Equitable Fishery. And we're committed to advocating for stakeholder interests within Oregon's Dungeness crab fishery. I want to just take a couple moments to introduce both myself and our organization. I've been involved in fisheries issues for a long time. In addition to being a lifelong fisherman myself and a former deckhand, I was part of a coalition as in my work with San Diego Coastkeeper prior to law school, advocating for the passage of California's Marine Life Protection Act and the network of marine protected areas that applied along the South Coast. And then in my legal career, a substantial portion of my practice is devoted to representing fishers and the fishing community and their interests. So these types of issues are things that I've looked at from a number of angles over many, many years. And the one constant across that experience has been that broad stakeholder engagement and engagement with a diverse range of perspectives is without question the key to better policy and sound policy moving forward. With respect to our organization, the name was not chosen by accident. We think that sustainability and equity are core to maintaining the health of what really is Oregon's flagship fishery and seafood product. Sustainability is twofold. It's both environmental and economic. We need to ensure the biological and ecological health of the fishery. And we also need to make sure that the economics of the fishery represent the mom and pop operations that have kept it running for many generations and ensure that new generations of fishers are going to have the incentives and the opportunity to continue that tradition that's really central to our culture here in Oregon. And I can assure you that on both fronts, this has been my lived experience, and perhaps it's a little cliche, but I think it's true. Nobody is more committed to maintaining fishery health than the people who are out there on the front lines, the fishers. So that's who I'm representing. With respect to equity, I don't think you can have a sustainable fishery without an equitable fishery. And what I mean by that is we need to avoid the consolidation of this industry within the hands of a few very powerful players. We need to democratize the fishery so that markets are competitive and so that a range of business interests are able to participate from the California to the Washington border. So I want to do two things. I want to briefly address our concerns. Chair, did you have a question?
Well, you just need to wrap up if you
Oh,
also.
well, I'll be real quick. In that case, I'll omit the negative. You're all familiar with the public letter, the open letter that came out. One issue I want to just hit very quickly on that point is, my clients are about to go set gear in 20-foot seas right now. And that was something that was highlighted in that letter, is that these delays are a risk to fisher safety. And that has really come to pass. And so I just think in the future, it should be given heavy weight in considering an opener. And on the positive, I just want to say, like I said, we're forward thinking. I'm a pragmatist, and we really appreciate the opportunity to work with this commission and with staff in that regard moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I don't see questions at this time, so we'll thank you for your
Thank you very much.
input. Commissioners, we need to go back to a mundane item, minutes. So either questions, revisions, or if I could have a motion on the minutes from last meeting.
I would move to approve the minutes.
I can read it. Is that, you need us to read the thing?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. That's better.
Okay. I move to approve the December 16, 2022 meeting minutes and continued authority to correct grammar and punctuation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from December 16, 2022. Those in favor, could I have a thumbs up? Thank you. It's everybody, Michelle. So we'll move forward. That one is adopted, and we'll go to Exhibit C, and I think we have Ken.
Yes, you
I'll
do.
let you introduce yourself.
Sure thing. Good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners, Director Melcher. For the record, my name is Ken Loffink. I'm the administrator of our Administrative Services Division here in Salem. Wait for the slides to pop up here before I get started, but I did hear the chair say try to get out of here before noon, so challenge accepted. I'll try to do my best to be brief here. Before I go, I do want to say thanks and a quick shout out to John Seaborn and Steve Emerson and Fish Division for helping to put these slides together. We're here today to talk about or to set the schedule of damages for commercial fishing violations. ORS 506720 states that the State Fish and Wildlife Commission may institute suit for recovery of damage for unlawful taking, possession of, or killing of food fish. So in short, the commission may file a civil suit to recover damages from the unlawful taking of fish. I do want to highlight this is separate from, say, fines or restitution that the department may receive from a criminal proceeding or from a court proceeding. This statute solely refers to if the department or the commission chose to sue in civil fashion someone for in order to recover damages for unlawful taking of fish. Next slide. And if it seems like we just did this, well, we did about a year ago, exactly a year ago. The statute goes on to say that the commission shall set by rule in January of each year the average market value of each species of food fish for the year. This average market value is essentially what sets that schedule of damages. It sets what, if we were to go to civil court, what we could potentially recover through that fashion. Next slide. And the statute goes on to categorize these damages specifically, and this is in statute again, pink shrimp, you can see there, depending on the violation, it's a certain percentage of what that average market value is. Ocean and salmon steelhead, the first violation is 2 times the average market value. Then from there, $125 per fish. Other salmon steelhead, which would really be Columbia River steelhead, is set in that statute at just a flat $125 per fish. And then all other fish go into the 4th bucket, which is really just 2 times that average market value. Next slide, please. So what is the average market value? So the average market value is proposed in OAR 635006022 in your packet. And the average market value is very simply the value of species of fish at the market for the previous year. So 2022 values for whatever food fish, and that value is calculated per pound. So we take the values across the board for the entire year and simply average them by species to come up with the average dollar per pound for those species. In your packet, you'll see the individual values listed that each species. If it's bolded, that means it changed. It either increased or decreased. If it isn't bolded, there's no strike through. It means the value stayed the same from last year. And as I noted before, statute does exclude Columbia River salmon and steelhead from the average market value. And instead, statute just says those fish are $125 per fish if we were to go down and try to recover damages. Next slide, please. I did want to say that, we do have a legislative concept in for this legislative session. And we hope that if successful, it would allow the department to kind of simplify this process. We already, through a separate rule, set what's called the fair market value. And that's a more or less a running total, if you will, of what the current market is for a given species of fish. We already do that for a variety of other reasons. It's a more accurate reflection of what's going on at any given time. And so this would keep us from having to kind of retroactively go back and look at the previous year to set these values. And then it just would simplify the statute as well to just say, the damages for all species across the board are 2 times the fair market value. So simplify it, eliminate those 4 boxes and go with that. Next slide, please. So with that, the average market values are set in the rules in your packet. Staff is recommending that you adopt the proposed rule amendments. And next slide. And we have a draft motion up for your consideration.
Can I have one quick question? I don't see other questions yet, but I understand that this has been on the books for a long time.
Yep.
Maybe 16, 20 years, however long, and we have not used it in a civil case. Can you remind me, though, what was the original purpose for this? Or is this one sort of lost in the fog?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioners, I don't know if I can speak to the original purpose, but from my standpoint, I think it's on there as just another option that the department could employ in an extreme case to recover damages. We have, our partners at OSP in the courts, we have restitution and fines that are imposed that way. I think the intent of this is just to provide the department with an extra option if we so chose to go after someone or some entity civilly. So yeah, I don't know if that was the original intent, but that's my interpretation of it now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So
I would just add, I think, and Annika may want to add something as well. I think probably it was anticipated that there may be times where a criminal charge is dropped for some reason, and they wanted to make sure the commission had the authority to go pursue civil damages for these violations. Reality is at 2 times the market value, the value would have to be pretty high. It'd have to be a very egregious violation before we would ever spend all the money to pursue civil damages and essentially not go backwards. We don't want to spend more money on attorney's fees than we recover in in terms of civil damages. So, but in my 17 years in the director's office, we've never used it. And
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any other time.
So we have other means to deal with enforcement.
Yes.
Anything else that you wanted to add? Okay, then commissioners, seeing no other questions, is there a motion? Oh, sorry, Becky. Commissioner Hatfield.
The motion to redeem myself from the sloppy motion that I made before.
You
I was
may. Go right
reverting
ahead.
to the Paisley School Board. We kind of, man, we jam right through those approval of minutes. So I was like in that brain instead of, okay, use that you are queued up here, Becky. So I want to show that I can do this, you guys. I move to amend OAR 635-006-0232 as proposed by staff in attachment 3.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde and seconded by Commissioner Spellbrink to amend OAR 635-006-0232 as read into the record. Any questions? If not, let's have a thumbs up or down vote on this one. Those in favor? It's unanimous, so that one carries. Thank you.
Rock on,
Thank you.
Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Then we'll move to Exhibit D, Rocky Mountain Goat Fire Impacted Hunts, and Brian Wolfer. Go right ahead.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, Commissioners, Director Melcher. For the record, I'm Brian Wolfer. I'm the Deputy Administrator in the Wildlife Division. And Michelle, do I advance my own slides? Clicker. So I'm here today to talk to you about the 2022 Rocky Mountain goat hunts that were impacted by wildfire. For some quick background, the department is very conservative in how we manage our Rocky Mountain goat hunts. All of our hunting is through controlled hunt tag issuance, with the addition of one raffle tag and one auction tag to fund management of Rocky Mountain goats. One of the other things we do that's very conservative is require a mandatory orientation for all of our goat hunters. And so these goat hunters attend a class that we put on in conjunction with the Oregon Wild Sheep Foundation. And part of the emphasis there is to teach the hunters a little bit about our Rocky Mountain goats, but also to teach them how to tell billies from nannies so that we can make sure we're focusing that harvest on our billy goats. We find that these hunts are a very highly sought after opportunity. In 2022, we offered 29 tags over 16 hunts and had nearly 18,000 applicants for those tags. So given how sought after this is, these hunts are limited to a person only being able to obtain one controlled hunt tag in a lifetime. There's an exception for the raffle and auction tag. And so that limit is set in statute. Considering that, we do very carefully try to manage the opportunity for a very high success rate. And we generally run between 90 and 100% success rate on these goat hunts. It is very rough terrain. These hunts are generally occurring in wilderness area. And so we do have some times where hunters aren't able to hunt in the way they think they can. And so we do occasionally have tags that go unfilled. But we assume that these hunters are going to be 100% successful when we set our tag numbers. We also have a mandatory check-in, maybe checkout's a better term, but we have a mandatory check-in of hunters following their hunt. So they have to bring their goat in, it's inspected by our biologists. We mark the horns, making it legal for them to retain those horns. And even for hunters that are unsuccessful, they have to check out with the biologist, generally over the phone, let them know that they're done with the hunt. So we know who hunted, how they hunted. We get some information about how their hunt went. So jumping to the 2022 wildfire season, like we've seen the last few years, 2022 was a very bad wildfire season for Oregon again. In Northeast Oregon in particular, we had some lightning storms that rolled through in late August and maybe a little bit into September, and there were numerous wildfire starts that happened. One of those was the Double Creek fire, and that's shown in the photo here. That fire was in the Snake River unit, turned into what I'm going to classify as maybe one of our mega fires. So it reached 170,000+ acres in size. Did make it across the Imnaha River and into the Imnaha unit a little bit, but was mostly in the Snake River unit. We also had a number of fires in the Eagle Cap Wilderness. The three biggest were the Sturgill, Nebo, and Goat Mountain #2 fires. And I'll point out the Eagle Cap Wilderness it includes parts of 5 different wildlife management units. It's a very big, expansive wilderness. And the fires that happened in there were managed primarily for wilderness values. That means the firefighters were not trying to extinguish the fires. They were letting the fire perform its kind of natural processes in the wilderness. But they were trying to protect infrastructure, both private inholding infrastructure and Forest Service infrastructure. And in total, those fires that made up those complexes in the Eagle Cap Wilderness were about 36,000 acres. So not as large as some of the other fires we've seen. So when we look at the impact that these fires had on our goat hunters, one of the biggest impacts is not from the flames of the fire, but from the closures that were associated with them. We saw expansive closures, both general access closures, but then also road closures. And so on the maps you see there on the screen, the one on the left shows the Double Creek fire closure in red hash, and it extended from really the edge of the private land boundaries along the Imnaha Wilderness or Imnaha River all the way to the Snake River. And at times we're excluding people from about 95% of the Snake River unit and 100% exclusion from many of our goat hunts. The map on the right shows some of those Eagle Cap Wilderness fires, and you can see the outline of the fire footprint in red, but you can see that the access closures were much greater than the actual footprint of the fire. Part of that is because of the challenges of evacuating people from a wilderness if a fire blows up and gets especially big. So these fires created a lot of uncertainty for hunters. The firefighters couldn't tell them when the fires might come under control, when access may resume. And there was conflicting closure information, especially as we got towards the end of the fire season and closure areas were being reduced, and firefighter information available on some websites had different closure information than maybe the Forest Service, and that was very difficult for our hunters to navigate. So some of the agency actions that we took related to these fire impacted goat hunts are really to try to communicate what we knew with hunters, and that primarily happened with the field staff. Again, just like the hunters didn't know when things might open up, we didn't know when things might open up either. And we quickly learned that our hunters with these once in a lifetime goat tags were very concerned about missing out on their opportunity to use that tag. I'll point out that of our 29 hunters, there was a period of time in early September where half of those did not have access to their hunt area that was either ongoing or upcoming. And that created a lot of stress for them and was something that we've not experienced before. So one of the things that we did as staff is we filed a temporary rule that would extend those impacted seasons through the end of November, really trying to signal to the hunters that we were going to do everything we could to let them get in, that we were going to, that their ability to hunt was going to be dictated by fire on the front end and by weather on the back end. And still heard some concern from hunters that they weren't going to be able to hunt in November, most likely because of snows and conditions in the wilderness. And our hope was that we would see maybe a little bit later fall and some opportunities to hunt. But we encouraged hunters to try to hunt during that extended period, if at all possible. But at the same time, we knew that some of them may not be able to do that, may not feel safe doing it. And so we did make the commitment that as staff, we would come before you with a recommendation to do an extension of their season into 2023 if they did not or could not hunt. But when we did that, we also stressed that the outcome today would be uncertain. And so if they could hunt at all, they should try to do so. What we found is most hunters that were impacted by the fires were able to get in and hunt once access reopened. They hunted with good success. They still found goats. We found that the goats were still there after the fire. But we did have a couple of hunters that we're going to talk about today that were not able to get in or did not hunt or hunted very little. So one quick kind of mention about what we see with goats and fire. And I'm going to say that following these fires, we did get our staff up to do some limited aerial surveys. We had some weather challenges after the smoke cleared and the aircraft restrictions went away. We saw snows come pretty quickly, and so it was hard for the biologists to get up and survey and then try to find white goats against a white background is always challenging. But we did see goats. We expect to have more thorough look at goats in 2023. But we do know that the hunters that went in were able to see goats, and that's really what we would expect. We see fire impacts on goats are generally short duration. These are not species that are associated with old growth forests, and so they're associated with rocky soils, sparse vegetation, grass and forbs. And so fire is not as complete burning in that type of landscape, and there's usually places where goats can get away from the flames. So we're not aware of direct goat mortality from the fire. And when we look at another recent fire in goat habitat in 2020, the Lion's Head fire burned up and over Mount Jefferson. Our staff was concerned about how that was going to affect the goats. We found that it was a little hard to find the goats in the year after the fire because they did move. They changed drainages and where they usually hung out. But 2 years after the fire, we had record goat counts up there. And so the goats actually survived the fire, were just displaced and actually did well once the landscape started to recover. So specifically what we're recommending today is the extension of 2 hunts for hunters that did not hunt. So the 260B1 and 260B2 are Goat Mountain #1 and Goat Mountain #2 hunts. These 2 hunts each had 2 tag holders. There was 1 tag holder from each of the hunts that was able to hunt and did harvest a goat after fire closures lifted, but we had the tag holder for each of those that did not participate in the hunt at all. We also are asking for an extension of the hunt opportunity for a tag holder in 959A1. This is the Hat Point #1 hunt. In this case, we had 2 tag holders that had tags for the 959A1. One of those was able to hunt after the fire closures lifted and harvested a goat. The other one went out to hunt, and one of the kind of known consequences, but unfortunate consequences of extending season dates is that when we had multiple hunts in an area to try to disperse hunters over time, we lost the ability to do that. And so one of these hunters went in to hunt. There were other hunters in there, and this person let them complete their hunt, and they were successful. And then this person was not able to hunt the next day and got driven out by snows, and so felt that they really didn't get much of a chance to hunt. And so we're bringing that one before you also. I believe you have in front of you an addendum to the rule where we made a clarification that there is an authorization from the department necessary for these tag holders, and that authorization will likely be either an affidavit or an attestation that the person meets these requirements, and then we will provide them that authorization so that they could hunt in the 2023 season dates for that hunt area that they had drawn in 2022, and this would be an extension of the 2022 tags. So with that, I can answer any questions you have right now, but I do believe we also have some public testimony.
We do have 2 people that would like to testify. So are there quick questions right now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. My quick question, thank you, Brian. My quick question is it literally we're voting on just these 3 people and just this 1 hunt? Okay, and then but ongoing, it goes back to normal?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did you also want to mention that? Yeah, I want to mention that I requested these changes because I wanted it to be very specific that the department made their, that they made the determination, and it looked a little too wide open in the language before. And so Brian was able to make the changes there, and I appreciate that, so. Thank you. Then we do have two people who would like to testify, Nick Obradovich and Tyler Dungannon. So let's go ahead with Nick. Both online. Okay, Nick.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Good morning, Chair Wall and Commissioners. Is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I wanted to first thank you all for the work that you do and for keeping our state's wildlife as wonderful and healthy as it is. I very much appreciate that. I'm Dr. Nick Obradovich, and I'll be brief here because I've already submitted written comment as well. I consider myself a meat hunter. I like feeding my family with wild game and sort of having the self-reliance and responsibility that is implied in all of that. And as a result, I never thought I was going to hunt for a sort of prize species like Rocky Mountain goat. The odds, as you saw from Brian, are very, very low probability to draw, and so I simply just never thought about it. When I did draw this last spring, I was extremely surprised and very excited. I also then learned that the hunt that I had applied for, 960B2 in Goat Mountain, was deemed the hardest hunt in the state, both for the terrain and also for the late period in which you go into the Eagle Cap Wilderness 10 miles in mountaineering conditions in the Malawas. I spend a lot of time in the backcountry. I don't consider myself a mountaineer person, and as a result, we were oriented towards trying to get the hunt done early in that season and did a bunch of preparation, and we're very excited in the lead up to this hunt. It's a backpack hunt. Got all the backpacking gear ready, got fit, learned a ton about Rocky Mountain goats, which are an amazing species, and basically was all ready to go. Was in scouting the unit late August and with my friend Carl, and we saw some fires blow up right in the basin that we were in. And we called in to report the reignition of the Goat Mountain #2 fire from the ridge. And we stayed there for a day when the winds weren't really kicking. And then the next morning, the winds picked up and the fire threw up a pyrocumulonimbus cloud. And we were getting ash rain down on us, and we hustled out in a bit of a harrowing experience, to be honest. The wilderness subsequently closed after that event. And I had this sort of adrenaline mixed with sinking feeling, because seeing those pyrocumulonimbus clouds, I knew that the Goat Mountain area, which was heavily impacted by both the Sturgill fire and the Goat Mountain 2 fire, very likely would close, and it did. And the wilderness was closed for the week that we had set aside, my friends and I had set aside to be able to go into that wilderness, and we had no estimation as to when it would reopen. It then reopened, and we sort of hastily attempted to put together the ability to get back out there, 10 miles back into the backcountry. And then in mid-October, it started to snow, and by November 8th, the snow was at record levels for that date. I, again, am not a mountaineering person. I don't have experience with extreme mountaineering, and I wasn't comfortable on the early end of that because I was hearing reports of smoke still filling the basin. And then as soon as the snows fell, I knew that it would be pretty risky to go in there and try and get the goats where we had found them prior to the fire. So ultimately, I was very lucky to draw the tag. I was also very unlucky to have this unit burn for the first time in decades, right when we were trying to hunt that tag. And in general, I just want to really want to say that I appreciate staff's recommendation on this, because I think if I had gone in, I would have felt very pressed to shoot really any goat that I found, given the tenuousness of the nature of finding those goats at that point in time, being able to access them. And they had also impressed on me the importance of really only going after a billy goat for the conservation related reasons. So ultimately, I appreciate the opportunity and your consideration of the opportunity to move forward with being able to hunt again next year. That would mean a lot to me. And ultimately, in a general sense, even if I account for my own bias in this, I would like that to be something that was extended to anybody else who was in this similar situation and who had prepared as much as we had for this type of hunt, even if it meant that I was slightly less likely to draw a bighorn sheep tag, for example. So thank you for hearing me, and I appreciate your consideration of the matter.
Thank you, Nick. I don't see questions at this point, so we will go to Tyler Gannon.
Thank you, Chair Wall, Commissioners, and Director Melcher. For the record, my name is Tyler Gannon. I'm the Conservation Coordinator for the Oregon Hunters Association. And OHA supports Nick here and supports this ODFW staff proposal to allow these few Rocky Mountain goat hunters the opportunity to hunt Rocky Mountain goat in 2023, given the circumstances. So we encourage the commission here to adopt staff recommendations for both the issues 1 and 2 discussed by Brian Wolfer here. We trust that ODFW will ensure that mountain goat tag allocations will reflect goat population's ability to withstand harvest in 2023. And we want to encourage ODFW to maintain their ability to alter mountain goat boundaries for hunters given these special circumstances. And ultimately, OHA believes that these few hunters that drew these once in a lifetime tags, they really deserve an opportunity to hunt in 2023. But we should certainly exercise caution and reserve the right to move these hunters around to ensure that we're managing mountain goat sustainably. One final note, OHA wants to acknowledge and give kudos to ODFW staff and Brian Wolfer here for their efforts and really across the state recently and past years. ODFW is putting in a lot of effort to make these unfortunate situations better for hunters and make them as fair as possible for hunters that have drawn these highly sought after tags. I mean, we can only dream of drawing a mountain goat tag. I'm sitting here wishing I was in Nick's position, but I think it's safe to say that OHA is very appreciative of the effort that ODFW is putting in to make these circumstances more favorable for hunters. So that's all I have today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Tyler. We do have one question from Commissioner Labhart.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, Nick, I'm jealous of you. I think maybe you ought to put in for Mega Millions tonight too, because of your luck in being able to draw that tag. And so, Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd like to make the motion. I move to amend OAR 635 Division 067 as proposed by staff in Attachment 3, including Addendum 1, Exhibit D.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to amend OAR Chapter 635 as just read into the record. Any comments or questions, commissioners? Then let's have a thumbs up or down vote. Everyone in favor, it's everybody, Michelle, so that one passes. So our regular meeting is adjourned. We will come back and restart the meeting after executive session. If I may, I'd like to read into the record what I need to for executive session. The Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission will now meet in executive session. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 2E, 2F, and 2H, which allows the commission to meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions, to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, and to consult with legal counsel with respect to litigation filed against the commission. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open the public meeting, in this case to re-adjourn it. So thank you. And Michelle, can you tell us where we need to go for? Thank you.